Welcome to this week's episode of Hard Claim with Viva La Sam. I'm Sam, and this is a show where we talk to people who play Blood on a Clocktower and get their player perspective of the game. And for this week's guest, we have with us the Podfather of Gaming, Stephen Buonocore. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for inviting me, Sam. This is great. You and I have a very mutual close friend in Nina, so she reached out, and I'm really glad to be here with you. This is great.
Yeah, and I'm especially excited because, when I did this show, I had this idea for this show. I wanted to get a broad range of experience of players. Naturally, most of the people I know have played hundreds of games, some even thousands. You have not played hundreds or thousands.
I've played ones of games. Definitely less than 10. Definitely less than 10 games. But I'm very experienced at other hidden things: hidden role, hidden agenda, hidden trader. If it has the word "hidden" in it, I love it in a game. So yeah, and I've got a lot of werewolf under my belt, certainly, which obviously is the granddaddy of all of these games.
Absolutely. Well, to start out, we like to ask our opening hard claim question. I have sent out a variety of token characters as if this were a game. You've drawn the Virgin token. So if me and you were talking first thing during a game, what would you want to say to me?
Oh, I'm gonna. Well, I wouldn't say anything. I'm not going to give you that much information the first night. That goes without saying. But at some point, I might hard claim as the Slayer. And that's what I did in my last game when I was the Baron, and I had to use that fake identity so that I was able to. We ended up winning.
Excellent.
The imp got killed. Passed it over to me. She was able to pass. Oh, she killed herself. Passed it over to me, and I ended up being able to win it for the demons.
Awesome. So how did you find out about Blood on a Clocktower? How did you discover it?
It became pretty big on, games coming out, and people started talking about it. And at one of the Dice Tower one of the Dice Tower events, I believe it was Dice Tower Retreat, a good friend of mine named Trey was running it. So I had to jump in that game. And that ended up to be a particularly epic game because I was the imp. Again, randomly, I seem to be always evil characters. I was the imp. My good buddy Zev Schlesinger, he's an icon in the game industry, was sitting to my right, and he was a good character. I believe he was the drunk in the end. And to his right was Joey from the Dice Tower. And he was evil too. So all of a sudden, when the first night Zev wakes up and he checked his power, he was the drunk, but he thought he was the one that knew the people on both sides of him. Which one is that? You can tell me immediately.
The empath.
The empath. He believed he was the empath, but he was the drunk. And he came, he says, I know you two guys are good. I know you two guys are good. And we both looked at each other and said, yes, we are. And for whatever reason, he always got that same information for night after night after night until at one point he realized that, yes, okay, he got different information and he was the drunk and bad things were about to happen to him. So that was my first experience with Blood on the Clocktower, and it was a great one. It was a long one because we had about 17, 18, 20 players in that game, but it was a great one.
That's great. A lot of people like to joke that empaths aren't real because so often storytellers will make them the drunk, or if they're not drunk, they'll get poisoned, or it's an evil player bluffing as an empath.
Yep.
So how many games have you played in total?
I can probably count it on one hand, maybe another couple of fingers on the other hand. So not a hell of a lot. So I've not very experienced, but it's a game that really rewards experience because the more you can internalize all these characters, that's how I think the game will shine. If I kind of like the way I said to you, what's that character name? And you immediately knew it because it's better if you, I think it seems like it's better if you have them all at your fingertips and then you can just use that information really quickly during the game, whether you're lying about it or whether somebody says something. You got to go look at your sheet and things like that. So I would say literally a half a dozen is around the number that I've played.
Yeah, I do like describing this as a learn as you go game, because you really need very little to start the game out with. You know, if somebody's doing the proper introduction, really takes about 5 minutes. And then as you get your first game, you're looking at your sheet, kind of learning things as you go. Your second game, you know a little bit more. Yeah, and it's interesting to kind of, I think, go through that process. So you said you have experience with other social deduction games, you know, Mafia/Werewolf. How do you think those compare to Blood on the Clocktower?
Well, they're a lot easier. We'll start with that, right? I mean, Werewolf, certainly in its basic form, is a great game. I like it quite a bit, and definitely cut my teeth, figuratively, on that game. And I've always rated that as my favorite in the genre. And I would still play that, depending on the group and things like that, because it's just more approachable, right? Having more teams, having that other group of outsiders changes things up. I do love Werewolf. This just is like, this is truly Werewolf on steroids, is the way I tell people about it. I've also played Resistance, Avalon, the same game essentially with some different roles in there, and I really enjoy that quite a bit. Very different experience, of course. That's a contained, very contained experience. Coup is sort of in that, social deduction, but your roles change constantly. And I'll throw out Station Fall. I don't know if you've played that yet. That's a new game.
I haven't, but I've known people who have, and they seem like they really enjoyed it.
That's a really, really good game. It's got like a million rules and corner cases and weird things that go on. But it's much more of a board game than what we're talking about here. But again, it's in that whole kind of hidden everything. Hidden, you don't know what characters people are. You don't know what their agendas are. If you don't know the character, you don't know the agenda. If you find out who they are, then you know their agenda. Then you can work against them. So it's a big game too. If if you're playing with 9 people, that's going to go over. It's going to go like 3 hours. So that's a big time commitment game. But this one, Blood on the Clocktower certainly ticks the box of having a complexity level that is very, very different, unique. Having these various roles, it just works on a lot of levels. My only complaint, and I will mention it, my complaint about Blood on the Clocktower is that it goes too long if there's too many players, or if the GM doesn't move things forward at a rate that makes sense. So I've played plenty of games that went over 2 hours. I mean, of the 6, a lot of them went over 2 hours, which starts to get a little bit too long, I think, for a game like this. I like these games that go between 1.5. I don't know I'd love to hear what your experience is. And now, as a very experienced player with, I'm assuming, very experienced DMs, maybe you're a DM. GM? Sorry. What time frame the game comes in for you?
I have a very big soapbox about this exact subject.
Cool. I hear it.
Blood on a Clocktower, which I know what a game box says is not always very accurate, but it does rate itself as 30 minutes to 2 hours. And I'm in the opinion that no game should ever go above 2 hours, exactly because after 2 hours, especially with a somewhat deep social deduction game like this, it's tiring. Even if you love the game, It just gets tiring.
It is. It does.
And it really does come down. You mentioned the pacing, and the storyteller pacing is extremely important in this game. Both because the game doesn't go long, but also because the longer you let things go, the better it helps a good team, because they have more time to work it out. The game's designed to limit. I always say players will talk for as long as you let them, so don't let them talk forever. you have to kind of push things along. The Pandemonium Institute, when they run this game at conventions, they'll run 9-player games, because that's probably kind of the sweet spot for a brand new player, if possible. They'll do that in 60 minutes. And that includes getting the player set down, reading the rules, getting the game going, running the game, ending it, explaining what happened, resetting for the next one. So as a good general rule of thumb, 9 players, you should be going about an hour. Uh, 12 players, which is a really common player count, roughly 90 minutes. I regularly run 15 plus player games. They almost never go above 2 hours. A lot of times they still go quicker.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely obviously the more players, the more time it's going to take. But I think a sweet spot for this game is if you can run it within 90 minutes. So therefore, constrain the player count, right? I think that's a good idea. Of course, I'm a big proponent of large player count games in general. So it's always hard to say, well, we've got enough players, can't take another player. I like the inclusivity of just bringing people into large games. So it's really hard to say can't have any more. But I think you kind of need to if you want to keep people sane. I think in this game.
Yeah. Well,
You mentioned Pandemonium Institute. I haven't met them, but I know that there's a cruise about to happen, and I'm gonna just mention that I'm going on the cruise.
awesome.
I like cruising. That's my jam. I love going on all the gaming cruises. I go on BGG at sea. I run my own Podfather the cruise. Just got off of one a few weeks ago. Went to Hawaii and back. So I'm going to be going on the Blood and Clocktower cruise. So if anybody out there, let's play and let's hang out. It's going to be great.
I will unfortunately not be there, but I'm very excited to see how it goes. I think you'll have a lot of fun. I have been to Clocktower Con last year. It was pretty much the first Blood on the Clocktower themed convention. Very fun. I mean, just Clocktower as far as I can see. And people will have beginner-friendly games, plenty of chances for more experienced games. But it's a really cool experience, and everybody has a ton of fun with it.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it next year.
So you pretty much only play this game in person, as far as I know, but there is a pretty large online community. I'm curious to get your thoughts about how you think this would translate to an online platform, and just how whatever your thoughts are on that.
I think it'd be great. I mean, I'm a big online role player, and if anything, this game does I think translate fairly well, as long as the platform, and I assume this is because that's the first time I've been inside this platform.
Yeah,
And
this is the official app.
Oh, cool! This is cool. So, and I assume you could go and get private chats with people and things like that, which obviously is most important for this game. But it should work very well. And in your experience, I assume it will play in the time frames that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Cool.
I've ran this game weekly for over about 3.5 years now. So yeah, I've spent a lot of time, nailing down like the timing and everything. It is a game that's primarily built in person. Most things translate pretty well. Some maybe not quite as much, but for the most part, it's still a really good experience in my very biased opinion. The opinion I've always had is playing this game online for a few years made it by far my favorite game of all time. Playing it in person is even better.
Well, I'm going to simply say that every experience in person in every game is better
That is
than
fair.
the same experience online. Now, we all moved online, right? In the beginning of COVID, everything went online. My role playing went online. That's something I could never even fathom doing back in the day, right? Role playing game. You got to sit around a table. How is it possible? Why would we ever want to do this thing online? Well, we had to do it online. We had no other choice. So, and it still is a better form. Like so when we are not doing the group of people that I play D&D 5 with, when we actually get together in person, which we do a few times out of the year, but most of the times we're busy, like at a convention, and there's like they're doing business. They're all in the game industry, the other players. So when we get together socially, which we do like completely socially, like once a year, we play together face to face, and we do it for like 8 hours. We'll role play for 8 hours. We'll play all morning, take a break for lunch, role play all evening, go to dinner. So yeah, it's still to me, all gaming is an in-person experience when it's at its best. That doesn't mean you can't play online. And again, I'm going to try this, and I think this would translate well. The hardest part is that breakout, when you go talk to people.
Mhm.
But besides that, I think that this would be a great experience online. And I look forward to trying that.
Yeah, one of the biggest advantages of online, at the very least, is accessibility. I'm
Of
currently in the
course.
process of trying to do monthly in-person games. It's taking kind of three of us to kind of get together. We have to have a location. We have to set an event, et cetera, et cetera. Here, I play with people from all across America, from the UK, from Australia, and I do that every week, and it's always a lovely time.
Yeah, it's absolutely and in a high player count game, right? Of all things,
Hmm.
right? When you need really, I mean, what's the minimum? 8 players. I mean, you can play with less, I guess,
Technically,
but
5 plus the storyteller.
right. So yeah, all right. So there's 6 people involved at the
Hmm.
absolute minimum, right? And I guess 8, 9 is probably sort of where you want to be at least,
More
right?
common, yeah, yeah,
More commonly.
yeah.
So how often can you get that number of people to agree on a time to drive someplace to find a
Hmm.
space that you've all agreed upon? So sure. Now when you can choose from the tens of thousands of players across the world, as long as you advertise and say, "Hey, we're going to be here. Pick a slot. Let's do this thing." Yeah, it's always that's going to always be the online experience. Then is always going to be the easier one to get versus the in-person experience.
Right. So when you are sitting down, getting ready to play the game, haven't even drawn a token yet. What are you thinking?
um, how uh, how I'm going to confuse and fool these people into believing whatever I say that I am. I mean, literally, even no matter who you are in the game, there's got to be a certain amount of subterfuge that you pull off. You have to. Um, you're a good guy. Person next to you says you're good. They're good. You kind of get it. You kind of believe them after a while, maybe. Then maybe you'll kind of let your guard down a little bit. So to me, it's like, I guess I'm looking for my targets. I guess I'm looking to see who I can mess with the most, who I can possibly believe as I get more information about them. Sussing out the people at the table. I guess that's the best way of addressing it.
I feel like this fits very well with many experienced players. Some people like playing for chaos. Some just kind of play it straightforward. A lot of different play styles, and I feel like basically what you just described would match with a lot of experienced players I know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, it's in that in this ultra very large genre of
Hmm.
roles and role playing and being trying to just figure out the plot of something, right? All of the everything in this kind of sphere between role playing and is hidden agendas and stuff. You've got to determine what's happening within the game to win, and of course you got to try to win. It's about having fun, of course. That is the number one thing. That's what I always say. It's not really about winning. It's about having fun. But you have to try to win, or else why are we doing this?
Absolutely.
So for me, trying to suss the players, right? It's kind of poker like too, right? You play the player sometimes. You don't necessarily play the cards you're dealt. So that's kind of the way I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, it is a social deduction game. Law and Clocktower is relatively unique and has a lot of information in it, but that can vary from script to script and setup to setup. But it's still a social game, and you can sometimes win or lose based on the social game. And I always find that quite
Absolutely.
interesting.
Oh yeah.
So if you draw your token, do you prefer that it's blue, meaning you're good, or red, meaning you're evil?
I always think that evil is a more interesting um, type of role. I guess I think that I get it in the games I've played so far, and obviously it's
Mhm.
on average you should get blue, right? You should get good
Right.
townsfolk or outsider more than you get minion or demon. But I definitely have had at least half. No, I'm going to go more than 50%. I've been red. I've been a bad guy, and with werewolf too. In werewolf, it's about the same, I guess, ratio of skew.
Right.
And I seem to get werewolf a lot. And of course, people want to kill me like early because I talk a lot. And as the more you talk in that game, and it translates to this, the more you talk, the more people think you're trying to manipulate the system and the game and the people, the more they want to hang you or kill you or whatever the case may be. So I got to be careful when I'm playing these games not to talk too much. And that is the hardest thing for Stephen Buonocore, is not to talk too much. I talk a lot.
There's someone who describes this game as a strategy game because it's not just about figuring out what's going on or deceiving people of what's going on. It's about convincing other people that what is going on or what's not going on. I always thought that was an interesting perspective.
I mean, I do want to get into one of your online games, especially before the cruise, but I have plenty of time to do that. And Nina, our mutual friend Nina, has been trying to get me to show up for one, and I absolutely should. I just been traveling like crazy.
Sure.
But it'll be really interesting to see some of these, let's just call it high level players, people who have got hundreds of games under their belt on the cruise, or even in one of your games online, to see how it all plays out. I think I'll hold my own, because in the end, it's really about how convincing I can be of what I am and how much information I can deduce between the players. And the more you can do that, the better you are going to be in general.
There's a lot of criticism of the game when you are a new player. Like, a lot of new players will play in a game with people who played a lot, and that just doesn't always mesh well. Again, maybe I'm a little biased. Most of the people I know are very welcoming of new players. They won't try to direct what they're doing. They won't just run over them and completely demolish them. They'll try to make it as friendly and as beginner friendly as possible. And not, there's a lot of good opportunities, I think.
Without
even playing
a doubt,
with people who are experienced.
Without a doubt. I mean, obviously, like you said, this, and what we discussed, this game is going to reward multiple plays quite a bit. You need to take it easy, especially if you want the players to have a good experience. And in the end, right, if you want to foster a community, right, in any game where you've got a lot of people who are rabid about it, you're trying to foster that community, make it inclusive, make it welcoming, make people have fun. You want all that to happen. That's the most important thing. Now, if you're playing with an uber competitive, experienced group, cut their throats, right? And just go at them and rip them apart and do it to them. That makes sense. But if you're playing when there's like a big power difference in the experience, right? The experience scale is like from 0 to 11. You got to be easy on the zeros. You got to be easy on newbies. I'd like to say that if I do play in one of these games, you can treat me maybe like as a 3. I'll give you a 3. No more than that. Don't roll over me.
There's a video review of Blood on a Clocktower that I always like citing. It was no puns included, and one of the points they make that always stuck out to me is so they compared, for example, the Ultimate Werewolf rulebook to the Blood on a Clocktower rulebook, and the Ultimate Werewolf rulebook has very little more than, well, here are some rolls, here's how you run them. About it. About half of the Blood on a Clocktower book is how to make the game fun. It's not rules, it's just how do you make the game fun. So this game really does want to focus on the fun factor. You said something earlier that I've said many times myself, and I'm not the only one, obviously, but you do have to play to win, but fun is the number one goal. And in my opinion, the most healthy groups are ones who keep that in mind.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Fun should be your number one goal in like everything,
right.
in gaming at least, right? In all things gaming, it's got to be about the fun factor. And if it's not, then why are we doing this, right? We can go to work instead, and not have fun. So if we're playing a game together, let's focus on ensuring it's fun. Unless it's a tournament or something like that, of course, where winning is sort of your absolute 100% goal. But we're hanging out together, we got to make it about the fun.
Yeah, especially if you have 9, 12, 15 people whose sole goal is to get together and lie to each other.
Yes.
It's nice to be able to come away afterward and be like, that was fun. Let's do it again.
Yeah, exactly. After you've lied to each other for all that time.
Right.
It's true. Absolutely true.
All right. So going back to the token you've drawn. So let's say it's a red token. You're evil. This game does something I feel like a bit different where, for example, in Mafia or Werewolf, you need to eliminate the entire evil team. And this one, you just need to eliminate the demon. Or, and then there's also the minions who are kind of like the helpers who are, trying to lead everything astray. Do you prefer being a demon or a minion?
Ooh, well, it's a lot of pressure, I think, when you're the demon, when you're in the games I played, right? The imp, right? That's
Right.
the basic one. It's the only one in the what is
Yeah.
it called again? In what's
Trouble
the
Brewing.
script called? Trouble Brewing, right?
Yeah.
So I think, and I've had both, especially that recent one that I mentioned at the top of the show. I was a minion, and I think it was my preference because the moment that I became the imp, I was like, oh crap! Now I got to carry the team. I got to carry us to the goal line. I did, which was really satisfying in the end. I guess it's funny. I guess a minion, and I bet most people would say that Stephen Buonocore would pick the demon, because I'm the outspoken, gregarious, very extroverted one. But I think being part of the entire group and the machinations that go on with being part of it, not the leader of it, I think that kind of works a little better for me.
That's a pretty common opinion. Of course, some people like being a demon, but it's the minion role is interesting. I feel like because you're a distraction. You don't need to survive till the end of the game. You just need to keep your demon alive. I have seen some minions do such a good of a job to convince town that they are good that you get to the end of the game and the only other person it points to is your demon. So the minion role is quite interesting.
Yeah, it really is.
One of the great things about this game is there's all kinds of strategies you can employ for pretty much any character. There is this concept we talk about sometimes called outed evil. And it's just where you're openly playing as an evil character or evil player that everybody knows is evil. I wondered what you would think of that.
There are people that have done this?
Yes, absolutely. It's
successfully?
So there's actually some characters in the game where part of the character ability involves being outed as evil.
Okay, so the ability, you have to use your ability, you have to be out. You have to be acknowledged as
sometimes,
evil?
yeah. There are, some people just play out at evil because people suspect they're evil, so they might as well lean into it and just kind of almost like a, what do you call it, like a double think kind of thing. It's like, if Bob's your demon, be like, oh, you should kill Bob, he's my demon, and hope people therefore don't kill Bob. Or there's a lot of potential strategies.
I guess there's potential in that, but that's a pretty advanced strategy to try to pull that off. And to me, it would be easy to just, for me, again, kind of novice at this, for me, it'd be easy to say, okay, if you're saying that, we're going to kill one of you. Let's see what happens. Right? And let's just let those chips fall where they may. So we'll kill Bob. Is the game over? Bob was the demon, you said? Is the game over? No? Then you're the liar, and let's kill you next, I guess? Or figure out where you then sit. So I find that to be a really interesting way of trying to play. I would like to be in a game where that happens and try to figure out how to deal with that.
Give it enough time, maybe.
It'll probably happen at some point.
So, an example of, and this is an advanced character, you won't experience this in any of the base game stuff, but there's a character called the Goblin, and if you're nominated and you publicly claim to everybody that you are the Goblin, and then they execute you, your team wins.
That's great. As long as you say it as you're about. I mean, during the nomination process, you just say, "I'm the Goblin."
Yeah, there's
Or
some technical details, but they're
yeah,
not really important for the purposes of
yeah,
this.
yeah. I love it. But then, okay, then do you vote
So
for the
so
person?
basically, what evil can do, if you imagine just that even existing on a script, you don't even have to be a goblin.
No, of course.
You don't even have to be technically an evil player. You just might be a good player who don't want to be executed. So you say, "Well, I'm the goblin. Go ahead, execute me."
Go ahead. You're gonna kill me. We're gonna win. Go for it. Yeah,
and
that's a pretty cool role.
yeah, that's a
Yeah,
fun one. Another good example of a character that has to out his evil in order to use their ability is the psychopath. On any given day before nominations open, you can just tell the group, "I'm the psychopath and I choose so and so," and that player dies. If they try to execute you, you only die if you win a game. If they win a game of Rochambeau with you, paper, rock, scissors.
So but you don't have to say that you're the psychopath, do you?
You have to publicly, which in this game publicly means you have to do a thing that the whole group knows what's going on. So it can't be ambiguous that you're the psychopath. You have to be specifically claiming to be the psychopath. Right. Yeah.
And
so that's an example of a character who, and again, you don't have to have a character like this to be outed evil, but that is a character who works on that premise of being outed evil.
I assume ask you a question. Have you played with every character? I assume you have.
No, there are
really
well over 100 characters in this game. It is very hard to be even. You probably don't know who Ben Burns is, but he's like the main
I've heard the name. He's the publisher, right?
Right. His official role right now is basically he does YouTube and Twitch, but he's kind of like the face of the game, really, in all these spaces. And he regularly pulls a character, and he's like, "Oh, I've never been this character." Now, sometimes the Twitch chat will remind him that he has been this character 3 weeks ago, but there's just so many characters in this game, with more coming out. Even in the base game, which has the 3 editions, roughly 25 characters per script. That's 75 characters, and that's, you imagine if you've been 73 characters, it still might be harder to pull any of those like other two. Yeah, there will be 200 characters when it's all said and done. Maybe it's more than that. I can't remember exactly.
You mean right now, have already created? There's 200.
Right now, that's publicly available. Probably closer to about 150. I don't know the exact numbers. There are a lot.
Wow. That's a lot of writing. I assume they test these characters. But that's a lot of stuff that they have to try to figure out if they work or not. So kudos to the publisher on this. It's a pretty cool feat to have created this, and definitely a lot harder than Werewolf to have created all of this. So so Bezier Games does the Werewolf. They're the biggest publisher of Werewolf. That's a public domain game, of course, so anybody can publish that. But they do the biggest one, the Ultimate Werewolf, and they've got the most characters created. But it's a lot easier to create new characters for that than this. There's more balance and more weirdnesses to these characters, I think, based on what I've seen, than it is with the werewolf characters.
Yeah, so right now with the published game, there are 3 editions. This one's Trouble Brewing. This is the only beginner level one, but it's a little deceptive because even though it's a beginner script, I throw the script constantly at veterans, and especially because the storyteller can set up things in certain ways, you can really put veterans through their paces in this script. It is really good. Statistically, it's said to have pretty much an even 50-50 win rate between good and evil. There's also Bad Moon Rising and Sex and Violets. We'll talk a little bit more about those in a little bit, just to get your opinions on how because eventually, hopefully one day, you would play those. Those are intermediate scripts. There are 4 more expansions planned. 2 will have intermediate scripts. 1 will have an expert script. And the 4th edition will just be a collection of characters. Because what this game does allow for is people can make their own custom scripts, mix and match characters. Cool. It's really hard to do them in a balanced way, especially as balanced as the base script, but there's just so much in this game, so many options, and yeah, it's really fun, I think.
I mean, I could see a good, an experienced player creating these, but probably doing it with lower player counts just to test them out. So again, so it doesn't go on for like 2+ hours, and you have 18 players there with all these new characters. But if you created new scripts that were, the 8 to 12 range of players, I can see somebody like you, because you've got so much experience, creating some pretty nifty combinations of characters. So test it out on me. Come on the cruise and test it out on me, or I'll show up one night. How's that?
To brag a little bit, I do have a fairly popular script called Extension Cord.
Cool.
It is, in fact, loaded into the app now because it's been the script of the month for about 6 months now. But
very cool.
And even, I know at Clocktower Con, they took several people's scripts, some of the more well-known scripts, and they made like a pretty like printout version of it, and my script was on there. So there's
very nice.
There's a lot of custom scripts out there. Some good, some not. But yeah, it's a pretty wide variety, and it's pretty cool to play with. So I'm curious to get your take also on, so we're looking at the good characters now. So, of course, most people are going to be townsfolk, but I feel like this game has an interesting balancing mechanism. I don't think it's probably the only game that does this, but you have your outsiders. And mostly your outsiders exist, when you add a new player, if you're looking at the player count, if you add an extra good player, that can be challenging for the evil. If you add an extra evil, that's going to be more challenging to good. So outsiders exist as sort of a buffer where it's an extra good player, but they have some kind of ability that's a little bit of a hindrance to the good team. And then you also have other characters that can add in even more outsiders, like Baron, for example, in this script. But yeah, I'm just curious what you think about the outsider characters, and if you haven't been an outsider character yet, if you would enjoy playing that and kind of dealing with that challenge.
I have not been an outsider yet. Start with that. I'll tell you that I think the drunk is a rough character, and I think it shouldn't even be played with newbies. I think it's a bad idea. And that's literally just me, the way that this comes across, because you think you're this and then you're not, and it's gonna. With one of the games I played, one of the inexperienced players said, "I just wasted 2 hours because I thought I was this, and it just didn't work for them." So the other ones are cool. I mean, I love them. I mean, to me, they're just another variant of a good character. They might be a little more powerful or not a little powerful, but they've just got some weirdness to them. But they're sort of advanced, I guess. Maybe you can say they're advanced townsfolk. That's kind of the way I look at them. Each one's got something interesting. I have not gotten one of those yet, so I'll have to hopefully get one of those in one of the future games.
It's interesting because the conventional advice usually is for people running games for new players is to put in the drunk.
Really? That's interesting.
A lot of people do find it interesting to, you get that end of the game reveal where your information that you're leaning on so hard, it's like, oh, it turns out, I was a drunk all along, and some people. So, without getting too much into like strategy and also script design, kind of the gist of it. One of the things you end up learning when you play Trouble Brewing enough is, yes, you have a drunk, yes, you have a poisoner, and you have a few other things that can give misinformation, but it's very limited. New players tend to always trust their information. And then once you've kind of played a while, you kind of get to a point where you don't trust any of your information. But you eventually get to a point you realize, and I remember myself having this kind of light bulb moment. There was like 4 of us saying, oh, we must be drunk or poisoned. And you kind of realize, well, we can't all be drunk or poisoned. Only 1 or 2 of us can. So, I don't know. Not trying to change your mind per se, but I'd be curious if it would change over time. Drunk also exists well for a. It really helps evil out. For you have what's called the outsider count. People are trying to figure out. If you have 12 players, you should have 2 outsiders. If you have a Baron, you have 4 outsiders. But that drunk, you have some leeway there. So if you have 2 claimed outsiders, 1 might be an evil, and there might be a hidden drunk somewhere. There's a lot of interplay with that. that's probably a whole other podcast discussion that people have talked about before. But yeah.
There's just a lot of variability here, and
Yeah.
I just, to me, I mean, I'm neither assured that that statement is, about the drunk is correct. I'm not. I just know one person had a very bad experience because they were like, I didn't know anything about what's going on, and that's not a kind of game that I liked, that I would like to play.
It's
And
very valid.
person didn't like it. Literally didn't like the game specifically because everything they thought they knew. Now, maybe I don't know if the GM was manipulating the information they got. So I think it's supposed to be random, right? If you're
It's not supposed to be random. It's supposed to be,
but give whatever information they want. Okay.
Usually it'll be whatever will help the evil team the most. But if evil's doing too strong, they might dial that back a bit. The storyteller role is really a whole other discussion in itself.
Right.
But yeah, it is meant to be basically helps balance the game and make it fun. Hopefully, some people just I've seen many comments in the past. People just can't get over the whole the storyteller gets to decide. How can you ever trust your information? And that's fine. Some people just don't like that, and I never will.
Sure.
All right, so I mentioned before that the retail game does come with 3 editions, Trouble Brewing being the one that you're familiar with. I'm curious if I kind of described a little bit of the other 2, what you think you might be interested in. Hopefully, maybe eventually you'll get to play each of them. Yeah, Bad Moon Rising, and you have Sex and Violets. Bad Moon Rising is often described, I say often, part of the official description calls it a death extravaganza. It is a very low information script. Hardly anybody gets direct information. There's lots of deaths and lots of way to protect from death. And a lot of your gameplay is kind of figuring out why people died or why they didn't die. Because you might even get executed and not die. For example, demons, there's a Shabaloth who kills 2 players each night. But also one of the players they killed the night before might be regurgitated and come back to life. You have the Poe who kills a player each night. But on one night, they can choose to kill no one, and then the following night, kill 3 people. Et cetera, et cetera. The different demons kind of kill in variable ways. Even some of the minions can kill, like, once or twice per game. Some of the townsfolk characters will cause deaths or protect from deaths. So then you have the other end of the spectrum, Sex and Violets, which is just an overload of information. Almost everybody gets information.
And sexy information, too, apparently.
Absolutely. Yeah, so it's a lot of information you get, but also people can change characters. Alignments can even change for some people. You might become evil.
Oh, wow.
There's even a way for a demon to become good, like kind of swap with the player. So all that information you're getting might change. You learn something, but you don't know that it's outdated information. Or there's even a demon called the Vortox who makes all the information just false. Which, spoiler, is easier to figure out for the good team than you might think. So I'm curious. There's one more concept I'll explain soon, but I'm curious between those what you think might sound more interesting.
While, what'd you call that second one? Sex and Violence.
While
the name Sex and Violence certainly sounds more... And violets or violence?
Violets. Like the flowers.
Violets, purple, yeah. Or yes. Sex and Violets. Well, that is possibly a more intriguing title. What's the first title again? It's
Bad Moon Rising.
Bad Moon Rising. I think the one with and that one has lots of information, right? You said, yeah.
Yeah, Bad Moon Rising is one with very little information.
Bad Moon has little information. The other one has a lot of information, but the information keeps changing on you. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I guess more information is better to me because you just have more decision points. I guess I'm going to go with that. If you have very little information, that's kind of like the beginning of every game. It's like everyone like kind of looks at each other. In my experience, limited experience, everyone kind of looks at each other. A little bit of talking. No one's giving up who they are of course, because nobody trusts anybody. No one gets killed usually, like maybe the first day, and villagers start dying because they start getting killed by the demon at every night. So for me, I guess more information would make it more interesting. But then again, you're going to change that information on me, possibly, which is pretty wild. So I guess I'll go with Sex and Violets, maybe. But is one more of an advanced script than the other one? This one sounds maybe more advanced.
They're both considered to be intermediate. And for myself, when I've ran, when I've ran for groups before who's only played Trouble Brewing, and then eventually they're like, okay, cool, let's try something else now. Usually I just kind of, I'll usually read the proper descriptions, but I'll just kind of describe each script and probably hand them the script and just see which one they find more interesting. The last group I did that with, they ended up going with Bad Moon Rising, but I know Ben Burns, prefers moving to Sex and Violets first because, in his opinion, it's more like Trouble Brewing than Bad Moon Rising is, which is probably true. So they're both intermediate. There's varying opinions as to which one's more you should go to next. I just usually go with whatever the players find more interesting.
I'll go with the Sex and Violets.
Excellent. It is good to eventually be familiar with both. One, they're both in the base game, so it's probably for, especially somebody playing in person, they'll have access to. Online, it's easier to have access to other stuff, but all three of the base editions kind of teach you fundamentals about the game that'll come into play later when you're doing more crazy custom scripts. Something I want to ask about Sex and Violets, it does bring up a brand new mechanic that's I think it's unique to this game as far as I know. Most people like it, some don't, but it's called madness. A player who is mad about something is trying to convince the group that something is true. So, for example, in Trouble Brewing, it doesn't have really the madness mechanic, but let's say you're the monk who gets to protect the player each night, and you protect Bob. The next day you try to convince everybody that you're the monk and that you protected Bob. Technically, you're mad as the monk, and you're mad that you protected Bob. There are two characters that interact with madness in Sex and Violets. There's a minion called Sarah Novus. Each night, choose a player and good character. They are mad that they are this character tomorrow or might be executed. So, if I picked you and picked, I know you won't know what this character does, but for example, Flower Girl, the next day you either need to try to convince everybody that you're the Flower Girl. You don't have to actually convince them, you just have to try to convince them. And if you don't do that, you might be executed, which ends the day, and then you just go to the next day. Similarly, you have a mutant who's an outsider. If you're mad about being an outsider, you might be executed. What I think is interesting about madness is it's basically its own form of misinformation. If you're a mutant and you don't want to be executed, which maybe eventually you do, if you don't want to be executed, you lie about being some other good character and you're putting out misinformation. Again, Sex and Violets is a script that's a ton of information. So
our friend, I gotta tell you something. Our friend Nina texted me and said it's because she's listening in. She says it's not sex, it's sects. Oh my god, I thought it was sex.
Yeah, meant to be a big old pun.
Thank you. Thank you, Nina, for correcting that. That's pretty funny.
Yeah. So I know that's probably.
It sounds interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, both of them. I mean, that mechanic sounds interesting. Again, I am always worried about a game that might layer on too much. But again, it always is going to vary by the group, right? If you got extremely experienced players, you add these things in, and that's what gives great variety, right? It's like board games that have expansions. Some people don't want to play with them. They don't play the game enough to enjoy the base game enough. So they're like, oh, it's too much stuff to add. So, but in a experienced group, adding in a new mechanic, madness in this case, why not?
Yeah, and it is strongly recommended. amongst most people, including the Pandemonium Institute, to be very familiar with Trouble Brewing before you try to move on to others. Some people get excited and do it too early, and some that works with. Some it's a little overwhelming. Some feel like there should be some kind of intermediate step. I disagree, but we won't get too much into that. But yeah, it's a good thing to move on to. Like, I think people do tend to overestimate how much of a jump it is. But you do want to be like, with just a few games of Trouble Brewing, I wouldn't recommend moving to those advanced or intermediate scripts yet.
I hear you.
All right, so one final question for you. This is very much not a serious question. But if you look at the script for Trouble Brewing, which if you don't have the tab on the side pulled out, you can pull it out and it'll show it here on the screen. Which of these characters would you like to be in real life?
Which one of these characters do I want to be in real life?
Yeah.
Oh my God! I'm not truly evil, even though one of my nicknames in gaming is the evil one. I'm not evil.
Fun fact about Bad Moon Rising: that there is a minion called Godfather.
That's funny. Is there? Very cool. I'm the Podfather of Gaming.
Right. We can make that a homebrew character.
There you go. You can put it in the game, but then you're going to give it to me probably. I'll take the soldier. I'm safe from the demon. It's perfect.
Excellent.
Can't kill me.
Sounds good to me.
All
right. Is there anything you'd like to plug?
If you don't mind, just a couple. I never really said who I was. I hope at least some of the people out there know who I am, and then can mention something that's going on right now in my life. So I am the chairman of the board for a new publishing company called Play2Z, and Zev Schlesinger who's again an icon in hobby gaming. He is the president of the company. He's running the company, and we have a board that just oversees it. But he's right now just running it himself, doing an amazing job. And what we're going to have, in fact, I believe it's going to be on GameFound or on Kickstarter. I'm pretty sure it's going to be on GameFound, so crowdfunding. It's a game called 23 Knives. 23 Knives are the number of knives that were pushed into Caesar when he was killed, Julius Caesar. So in a game of 23 Knives, you take on the role of a Roman citizen with one of three alliances: a loyalist to Caesar, a liberator of Rome, or an opportunist biding their time. You can kind of see a little bit here. We call this a social manipulation game, right? Not social deduction, social manipulation. Because throughout the game, you're going to travel through Rome and you're going to manipulate other citizens to try to sway them to your cause. At the end of the game, if there are 23 or more knives in the curia, which you can place knives or doves in there, Caesar's dead, and the liberator most committed to killing Caesar wins. And with fewer than 23 knives, the loyalist most dedicated to saving Caesar wins. And opportunists are those who linger, wait to shift the fate of Caesar at the last moment. If they do, they win as a team. So social manipulation, not exactly social deduction, though you have to try to figure out, well, what side is a given player on at any given time as they get manipulated by having cards played on them. So I hope maybe some of your audience would go check this out. Again, coming on GameFound, I believe, called 23 Knives from Play2Z Games. And just for other things that I'm doing in my life, my long-running podcast of about 12 years at this point, and 10 years at this point, is called Board Games Insider, which is now powered by Board Game Geek. We're part of their network now, and it's available on audio or video on my Podfather of Gaming YouTube channel. And there on Board Games Insider, we talk about the gaming industry. Three people: myself, Corey Thompson, who's a news person, used to be with the Dice Tower, now he's with me, and Ignacy Chevicek of Portal Games, the president there. Three insiders in the industry, and we talk about the events that are happening in the industry. Plus, we also talk about questions that are asked of us in our guild on Board Game Geek. So I hope any of your listeners or watchers will check out Board Games Insider. Thank you so much, Sam, for having me on. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you very much. And we'll put links to all that in the description of the video so people can go straight to it. I think people might be interested in a game like that. I think that sounds pretty cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope they will check out 23 Knives from Play2Z.
All right. Well, thank you for watching this week of Hard Claim with Viva La Sam. We'll be back next week with another episode. See you then.